Hi, Karen.
Hi there.
How do you like my haircut?
Your haircut looks good, Jayendra.
Any haircut would feel good at least.
True that. So they're open there, huh?
Yeah, it was good how careful they are.
Mm.
All the cleaning and spacing and everything.
They're so not careful here. Go downtown to Coeur d'Alene and it's just so Idaho, you know? There's Anne, there's Megan, Alita. Oh, I better make you the host here. You're the host now, Jayendra.
Thank you.
Did you get your computer figured out, Danielle?
I did. Yes, I'm not on my phone today.
Good job. Marianne, you're upside down. Nice inversion there. There we go.
Oh, the West Coasters are on early.
I know. I wondered what would happen today because it's August, you know, and it's a sunny, hot day, and I thought you might all be out on a boat or something.
Many areas of Europe, it's very much vacation time.
Yeah.
Not in Ireland, though.
Why is that? No vacations?
Because Christine's here.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Hi, Kathy.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. And there are already 12 people.
Pardon?
There are already 12 people here, and not everybody's on my screen. There's everybody.
Kathy, remind me where you live?
I live in the Netherlands, in between Leiden and The Hague.
Okay.
I went to The Hague today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was very surprising how many people had Belarusian flags. There was a protest, and then everybody just showed up with a Belarusian flag.
Oh.
What is a Belarusian flag?
It's white, and then it's got the top is white, and the middle part is a red stripe, and then the bottom is white.
Tell us briefly Kathy, why there's a protest about Belarus?
Oh, because it's called Europe's last dictatorship, and there were rigged elections, and there's evidence that people are being tortured there. It's right on Europe's doorstep, immediately to the east of Poland.
Is protests happening widely in Europe about it?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think
know.
so.
Kathy, it looks like your picture is frozen a little bit.
It's well
Or is it
known in
mine?
Europe. It's known in Europe, but
So my internet's a little bit in and out, Karen.
Oh, okay.
Karen, did you get a haircut?
I did, finally.
You both look freshly shorn.
Oh.
You and Karen.
I just usually have my hair back.
Oh. You both clean up real nice.
Thank you. At last.
I'm counting down the days until my haircut, I swear. I'm so excited.
It's like having a new identity.
I was telling Karen beforehand, I was sort of surprised, but maybe not, how careful the shop was where I went with cleaning and distancing and everything.
Well, do you know what else I saw in The Hague?
Did you see Sunshine Yoga?
I saw someone blowing a birthday cake.
Oh.
Candles, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh,
And then they passed it out and ate it.
oh, I see.
I'm like, that's okay. I don't need any.
Oh.
So I'm glad you were surprised how careful people were being, Jayendra, because I was surprised how careful people were not being.
Well, some of us in Coeur d'Alene are very aware of how careful people are not being. Just crazy. Some people are and some people aren't.
Well, it's a few minutes after. Shall we begin? And Karen, are you recording?
Yeah, it automatically records as soon as I turn the meeting on every time. So
before we start, can I say something?
Yes.
Yeah. I will have to leave half an hour before because I'm taking my mom to visit my father at the hospital. So I have to leave.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's great to see everybody. Hope you're having a good week. Let's begin with our Shanti Mantra's invocation. Wrong one. Karen, can you see the Shanti mantras on my screen, on your screen?
Yes, uh-huh.
Okay. So the Shanti mantras, I was thinking earlier about the translation. I think Saha must mean together. Om Sahanavavatu. May the students and the teachers be protected together. Sahanao Bhunaktu. May we enjoy the fruits of our practices together. I'm not sure if I'm translating it correctly. Sahaviryam karavavahe. Tejasvina. We recognize tejas, something about light, heat. Tejasvina vaditam astu. Ma vidvisha vahe. So if you like, you could bring your hands together. And we chant many possible reasons why we chant. You can consider for a moment why we chant at the beginning. And the words of this chant seem to speak to that, seem to tell us we chant to come together. Come together with the practice, with each other, the divine steadiness. So let's say it 3 times before the Om Shantis and then the Om Shantis 3 times. Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahanao Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karavavahe, Tejasvinavaditam Astu, Ma Vidvisha Vahe. Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahanao Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karavavahe, Tejasvinavaditamastu, Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahanao Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karavavahe, Tejasvinavaditamastu, Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So I get to teach first today, lead us first. Karen will be the second hour. And I have notes here to remind us of what we're doing. And part of this, today we're going to slow down a little bit. We're halfway through the text. 20 sutras, today is Sutra 10. So I'm going to review a few of the main ideas. And then Karen and I are going to focus on Sutra 10, which is sort of a pivot point in the entire text. So in Sutra 12, in his commentary, in his book, Chris Wallace sort of outlines the book. He says that Sutras 1 and 2 describe absolute reality. We're going to go back to Sutra 1. What's the nature of universal awareness? Then 3 to 6 describe the gradual stepping down process into manifestation, into the individual. 7 and 8, in my mind, sort of go off topic. In his outline, Christopher skipped 7 and 8. So 7 is called, sometimes referred to as the Sutra of the Numbers. And 8 is the one that describes all the different philosophical systems, saying how this one is, at that time, is the new manifestation, the refinement of all that came before. But then he says, Christopher does, 9 through 12 are the core of the text, because 9 and 12 describe the ordinary human condition prior to awakening. So the last one told us about the mala-covered samsaran. And then in the middle of this 9 through 12, 10 and 11 are going to show how awareness, chitti, consciousness, even when in the limited contracted state, never lets go of its essential nature as Shiva Shakti. So that's going to be sort of the subject this time and next time. In what way does Shiva Shakti become us and maintain her essential nature? And then he doesn't say this. This is in chapter 12 that Christopher's writing it. Presumably, Sutra 13 will take us onto the path of awakening. He doesn't say that. He's just describing what happens up through 12. So he says Sutras 9 to 12 were sort of in the center. And it reminded me of what I often like to say when I teach about the solstice time. That, for instance, in the northern hemisphere, in the winter to spring to summer, the sun's heading north. And for a few days, it sort of pauses. It ends its journey. You could say into manifestation. And so there's this time of in-between. And that's where we are sort of in this text. We're in an in-between time. In between the movement into manifestation and the movement back to union. So it's a good time to slow down for a moment, take a breath. We'll have one big idea today that we're going to be focusing on. Something that already appeared earlier, but that we haven't emphasized yet. So we're going to look at Shay Mirage's Invocation. So I'm going to switch over to this. And his invocation to this text. So he has another one, for instance, before his commentary on the Shiva Sutras. He has an invocation. In the Slack channel, marieke asked, a student of hers asked, is this like the main text for us? And I replied just now, I just noticed it. I said, it's not a main text. But what it is a text that very simply, comparatively simply, in 20 sutras, gives us the whole picture. And so that's why we chose it as our philosophy module. And really, starting around the 1980s, late 70s, 80s, there were 4 tantric texts that were widely available, started to be made available. And this is one of them. And so it's one that we have a few books written about it. There aren't very many tantric texts that there are a few books written about it. So it might seem like our main text, but it's one of a few, not because it's like designated, because it's the one that's available. And in his invocation, he begins, Om Namo Mangala Murtaye Atta Pratyabhinya Hridayam. So you see Atta there now, the Pratyabhinya Hridayam.
Hey, Jay.
Yes.
Maybe, did you want to scroll down a little bit? Do you have, because we see that the title, Shay Mirage's Invocation, but I think, yeah.
So I'm going to start over, and I was on the wrong, I had the wrong document up.
There we go.
In front.
Perfect.
So this is in front. Om Namo Mangala Murtaye Atta Pratyabhinya Hridayam. The next 2 verses are in what's called the shloka form. It's a very common verse form, 8 syllables per line. And there are different ways of chanting it. The one that I know is Namah Shivaya Satatam Panchakritya Vidayine Chiranandagana Swatma Marta Vabhasine Shankaropanishatsara Pratyabhinya Mahodade Udarami Param Saram samsara visha santidam. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Starting with about verse 10 of the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the whole Gita is in this verse form. The whole thing can be chanted like that. It says, Om, salutations to the embodiment of auspiciousness. Now, the Pratyabhinya Hridaya. Salutations always to Shiva, who continuously performs the 5 acts and who makes the highest reality, one's own self, shine forth, which is a mass of the bliss of divine consciousness. Om, peace, peace, peace. And then the part that I don't have, the Sanskrit, he says, I will here extract for you the ultimate essence from the great ocean of the recognition philosophy, which is itself the essence of the esoteric teachings of the auspicious one, for it neutralizes the poison of the cycle of suffering. So notice he's saying, I'm going to give you the essence of the essence of the essence, the essence of the best. And so he's trying to be very brief. Here, the essential substance of the teachings of the recognition of oneself as God will be gently and concisely opened up for the benefit of those rare devotees whose minds are open, are childlike, who have not labored in the science of rigorous philosophical reasoning, and whose longing for total immersion into the highest divinity continues to grow through the influence of their initial awakening experience, or Shaktipata. So my question is, looking at this, salutations always to Shiva, who continuously performs the 5 acts, and who makes the highest reality, one's own self, shine forth, which is a mass, Chidanandagana, the mass of the bliss of divine consciousness. How does he describe Shiva here, Shiva Shakti? And just to mention, it's going to be the subject of today's sutra. So he describes Shiva Shakti as Shiva as the one who continuously performs the 5 acts and who makes the highest reality shine forth, who manifests, who shines forth the mass, its own nature as the bliss of divine consciousness. So the 5 acts, what are called the 5 acts, the Pancha Kritya. Pancha means 5, Kritya is act. So I'm going to close this document and come back to my main document. So how is Shiva described? As the one who performs the 5 acts. So this is today's theme, and one of the most important teachings of this text, the Pancha Krityas. Sanskrit yoga has 2 words for action. I'll give some of you Anusara teachers a hint. This might be on the big exam for certification. What are the 2 words in Sanskrit for action? And the 2 are karma and kriya. And karma is action when it's done with attachment. This is sort of a diversion, it doesn't really matter. Kriya is action done from freedom, from attachment. And kritya is a form of the word kriya. So the 5 kriyas, the 5 acts of Shiva. Remember, kriya shakti is the 5th power. Icha, jnana, and kriya, the power of action. So the 5 actions are what awareness does. So last time I talked about how do we define supreme consciousness. One way is to ask, what does it do? And the 5 acts are the definition within non-dual Tantra of what the Absolute does. So are you familiar with the 5 acts? Many of you are. Just to review, the 5 acts are, there's a 3 and a 2. So a cycle of 3, creation, maintenance, dissolution. I have them in a different order here. Creation, maintenance, dissolution as a cycle of 3. Creation, and the actual word in Sanskrit, means an emission, of flowing out. So it's not like a creation from something separate. It's a moving into manifestation. And then the opposite is the dissolution, the dissolving back. You could, in sort of classical Hinduism, they might say destruction. But here it's really a dissolving back, a flowing forth, a dissolving back. And then in between is the maintenance, which actually is a constant emission, according to non-dual Tantra, a constant flashing forth. So it's not like that which is created is static. It's constantly evolving. It might be growing. And then at some point, the flashing forth starts to get weaker and weaker until it doesn't flash forth anymore. And that's dissolution. So it becomes sort of a complex theory within Tantra that we're not going to focus on here. But you have this cycle of creation, maintenance, dissolution. So the other 2 are concealment and revelation. So concealment could be a forgetting. Shiva Nataraj is the image symbolizing all this, and he stands on the demon of forgetfulness, for example. Forgetting, a hiding. We sometimes compare it to the game of hide and seek. It could be a limiting. So the 3 malas, the first one is we are limited. It could be a congealing from like a gaseous state to a liquid to a solid type of image. Shiva Shakti steps into manifestation and hides or conceals her presence, her existence as everything. We go through life having no idea that everything is this consciousness. It's been hidden or concealed. And then revelation, and the word for it is also means grace, could be a remembering, a recognition. I should write that down. Recognition. And the Sanskrit word for it is anugraha. So we have the concept of the play. Shiva Nataraj, the dancer, who symbolizes these 5 acts. The game of divine consciousness. This is a story of creation and dissolution. The dance, the play of consciousness. And this is all today's subject. So it's going to be applied in some way. So I want to go back, part of the review, to Sutra 1. Chitti swatantra vishvasiddhi hetuhu. And I sort of want to suggest over the course of this course, trying to remember that sutra. It's the seed sutra. It's the one that contains it all. Chitti, whether you call it awareness, jaw-dropping wonder, consciousness, Shiva Shakti, in her freedom, swatantra, becomes everything, is the cause of the performance of everything, the cause of the universe is this. So I'm mentioning here how the tradition says the first word of the first sutra contains it all. In what way does chitti contain everything that we've talked about so far? Goddess awareness, consciousness, which is active, which has freedom, the second word. She has the 5 powers. She performs the 5 acts. And the fact that it's feminine is pointing at it's alive. It's all of existence. And then it also says that the tradition says the first sutra contains it all. So how does this sutra sort of indicate, sort of forecast everything we've talked about so far? That the one becomes everything. It becomes the mind. It becomes all part. It becomes the object and the subject, etc. Chitti swatantra vishvasiddhi hetuhu. And then just to review our last one that we studied, Sutra 9, because of the contraction of consciousness, chitti, or chit, and its powers, shaktis, she becomes a transmigrating soul, covered by the 3 limitations. She becomes the mala-covered samsaran because of the contraction of consciousness. So how was your week as a mala-covered samsaran?
I find it to be like a freeing, it's like a lot of freedom in that, you know, it's like it's intentional. It's like, oh, there's great. It's like, I guess, yeah, relating to your like exclaiming, like just like a sense of relief that's like a part of the design of it. So.
Yeah. Here we are, an individual in some way experiencing being small, individual, not having those powers. But at the same time, I am this.
I keep on having glimpses of what it can be, you know, sort of, you have the limitations, but you also have the vastness, the expansiveness as well. So yeah. I like that duality. I know it's not duality, but
yeah. That pulsation, you could say.
Yes, yeah.
I find it interesting as much time that is spent on the remembering in all that we do, all that we study, all that we practice, all that we meditate, how easy it is in life to forget. And it's just a daily, for me anyway, it's a daily practice to remember. And when you forget that you didn't somehow fall outside of grace, you just forgot, and you know the path back to remember. So it's just this constant dance of forgetting and remembering to remember. And that it's not a huge problem. You're not broken if you've forgotten. You just get back on your path and remember again.
Great. When I first introduced this in my teacher training teaching, immersion teaching, I like to talk about the moments of revelation, like the moments, just any moment where you have a moment of, look at that. Or look at what I'm doing. Oh, wow. And maybe there's not one sort of final enlightenment, but there's the little moments all the time. I noticed in the chat, Kathy asked, when I talked about attachment regarding karma, she asked, is that, I'm going back to what I said about karma. Where's that? Karma. Yeah, action done with attachment, and kriya is action done freedom from attachment. She asked, is that attachment to the result or the world? Attachment to the result or the world. The Bhagavad Gita mentions result, the fruits of the action. One thing about Tantra is, and we're going to talk about this in a moment, be engaged with the world. So there's no rejection of the world. What do you think, Kathy?
Actually, Nicole brought up the Bhagavad Gita in our small chat, I think, with Amy last week, and non-attachment to results. And then it's comforting. It's comforting, the idea you asked, what do I think of that, not rejecting the world? That's comforting, because it'd be really hard.
Yes. That, what you just said, I think might have more meaning than you think. It could be really hard. And Tantra is not the path of choose the hard stuff.
Good.
Okay, shall we move on to Sutra 10? Sutra 10, in the preface, it says, so remember, Shay Mirage as the commentator often writes a little statement leading into each sutra. And these are in Christopher Wallace's book. And this time it says, one might now ask, is there some recognizable clue that indicates a person's divinity, such that even with reference to the condition of being a samsaran, one may confidently proclaim she is really God in that state of being a samsaran? And he answers his question. He says, there is a clue. This is taught. Tatapi tadvat pancha krityani karoti. Tatapi tadvat pancha krityani karoti. Even then, referring to Sutra 9, when in the contracted or limited state, the individual performs the 5 acts like universal consciousness does. Even then, referring to Sutra 9, when in the contracted or limited state, the individual performs the 5 acts like universal consciousness does. Kathy.
And that relates right back to what Amy said. She said, even if you momentarily forget, you're not broken.
Right, right. So down through Sutra 9, it's like coming to this low point in existence. We are the mala-covered samsara, and oh, life is terrible. But even then, even though you might not know it, you are doing what Supreme Consciousness does. You're performing the 5 acts. Let's practice the Sanskrit. If you're not muted, you might mute yourself. And we'll do it this half and that half. Tatapi tadvat. Tatapi tadvat. 2 more times. Tatapi tadvat. Tatapi tadvat. Then the second one, pancha krityani karoti. Pancha krityani karoti. Pancha krityani karoti. Then the whole thing. Tatapi tadvat pancha krityani karoti. Tatapi tadvat pancha krityani karoti. You can see the krityani, the Sanskrit's always changing the endings and so on. Pancha means 5, the 5 acts. Tatapi means even then. Tadvat, like that, like chitti, performing the 5 acts, even then. So the main idea is even us, even when in the contracted state, even us as ordinary individuals, we perform the 5 acts like supreme awareness. So question, in what way do we perform the acts of manifestation, maintenance, and dissolution? And then in what way do we perform concealment or revelation? In what way do we perform that cycle of creation, maintenance, dissolution? And then in what way do we form, and this is a pulsation, concealment or revelation, forgetting or remembering? So we already heard about the forgetting and remembering. How do we perform the first 3? That cycle of, there's obvious things like you cook a meal, you created something. You paint a picture, you play a song, you whatever, artistic things. In what other way do we create, maintain, dissolve? Any first thoughts? Amy?
My first thought is asana practice. We create shapes, we maintain them through the why did I just lose the Anusara? Muscular energy, organic energy. We maintain the shapes and then we dissolve them. I think about relationships too. You maintain a relationship and then they go through cycles and they can dissolve. Those are 2 things that pop in my mind.
The relationship reminds me of what I was saying about maintenance. It grows, it might lessen its brilliance or its light, etc. It might then expand again. Anybody else want to say, Nicole?
I think you have it at all different levels in everything we do. Like a thought, it comes up, you create, you have your focus on it, you have your maintenance of that thought, and then it dissolves and you go on to the next one. You can even see it in the breath, breathing in, maintaining it within the vessel, and then letting the exhalation dissolve. So I think it's actually everywhere. If you sort of look for it, it reveals itself.
Yeah. And so the emphasis here is that we as individuals perform these 5 acts. Moving on. So think about all that has happened in your life so far today, or yesterday if it's morning for you. Think about all that you have experienced and ask. So think about that. What are a few things that you experienced today? Think about 2 or 3 different things you experienced or did or that happened. And then who or what created your experience? So for instance, maybe somebody came into your life. Let's assume that we have a philosophy that you didn't create that person necessarily, at least in that moment. It might be a child or something, but or some object appeared, a car drove by, but you had an experience of it. Where did your experience come from? In what way did you yourself create, maintain, and dissolve it? Your experience of what happened. And in what way are we constantly, always performing all of this? Were you aware of your role as the source of your experience while you were experiencing it? Perhaps awareness, when we are aware, will be the revelation part. And awareness, when we're not aware, is the concealment. And the purpose of this text will be to tell us, and one of you talked about this earlier regarding last week, and the mala covered samsara, and how freeing it is to be aware that I'm a mala covered samsara. I have awareness. It's been revealed to me. And then every experience that I have, in what way, where does it come from? Does it, for instance, rise up out of the center, out of stillness within me, and it comes forth? If I am awareness, did I create that experience? So let's start looking at Shay Mirage's commentary.
Could I just ask a question, Jayendra?
Yes.
If you think about the Panchakritya, and I think you can only actually have that in our limited form of consciousness, because the acts are, I mean, if you think about Shiva as being absolute consciousness and the stillness, let's say the stillness, and Shakti being the creative energy, and more actually the individual forms, I think Shakti is sort of the one creating the Panchakritya, whereas so that is actually the limited version. Is this correct?
I think it's complicated.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different ways to look at it, especially when you come into the idea of an image of a Shiva and a Shakti. And sometimes I find that to be misleading, to have this image of sort of a male and a female.
It's not so much the male and the female to me. It's more of the stillness versus the activity.
Right.
And
Right.
To me, consciousness, as in being the absolute consciousness, not the individual consciousness, is more that stillness. And I'm talking about the stillness when it's actually all becomes one, like, you know, sort of that it's all one.
Well, one answer that occurs to me is this is the mystery.
Mm-hmm.
How the one has two main aspects. And at times it appears as stillness, like in meditation, if there's a moment of silence. And at times it appears as the dynamic aspect. And it's the two elements of the one. And to me, it's like the whole definition of non-dual Tantra. It's the origin of everything, is it understanding this, which is the mystery. The two aspects of the one. And one sort of dualistic way that I think of it is the male and the female, Shiva and Shakti, in this embrace where they're one. There's like no experience of two. But then there's this movement, which is the movement of bliss, and then a movement towards what if there were more? What if there were many? And that's where jnana comes up, and then kriya, and moving out into the many. So it's a great question, I think, and it is the mystery. And it's the key to understanding Tantra. And we're going to actually come back to it in a moment. So in the commentary, the first thing, it sort of reviews it, and Christopher Wallace says, even one who is thoroughly bound, deluded, and ignorant of his true nature is just as divine as the person who is free, awake, and self-realized. The evidence of this is that both are performing the 5 acts, though the one person does not recognize this. The difference is awareness and lack of awareness. Their essential nature is the same. So one thing I like to think of is that Shay Mirage is giving us a logical argument, the deductive reasoning. He says, Supreme Consciousness does this. I do the same thing. Therefore, I must be Supreme Consciousness. It's how logic works. And so Shay Mirage is giving us a very logical argument. Now, remember that one purpose of a commentary is to answer objections from philosophical rivals. So in his commentary, the next thing Shay Mirage goes to, it's very early, is he says, this is what makes non-dual Tantra different from the view of Advaita Vedanta. The non-dual Tantra, the non-dual Vedanta. Advaita means non-dual. So it's saying we're both non-dualists. How are we different? This sutra explains how we're different. Vedanta, I give a little bit of a background here. That Vedanta, for those of you who don't know it, means the end of the Veda or the essence of the Veda. And the source of Vedanta is the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, which are written from around 800 BCE to around the 4th century. Around 800, which is 200 years before this text is written, is the great sage Shankaracharya, who created what's called Advaita Vedanta. Shankaracharya is very influential. Interesting thing, he was a Shaivite. He wrote very important, respected texts about Shiva, such as the Shiva Manasa Puja, the mental worship of Shiva, the Dakshinamurti Stotra, a long text about Shiva as teacher. And the other thing he's known for is establishing what are called the mattas, the 4 or maybe there's 6 main ashrams or centers of meditation and teaching that became responsible for holding all of yoga together. So this is around the year 800. And he like creates a system for all the monks, all the swamis, and they're all going to be associated with one of these matas in the country. One of them is known as the Saraswati order. Many of the monks, the swamis from India today are from that Saraswati mata, for example. So that's Advaita Vedanta and the founder of it. So Vedanta's view, this is getting back to Shay Mirage, is that consciousness has no dynamism. So this is following up on what Nicole was saying earlier and others of you. That it has no activity, no Shakti, no Kriya, no activity. Tantra says that the one is dynamic, active, it performs the 5 acts, and is the power of creation or Shakti. Now remember the Kriya Shakti we talked about earlier. Consciousness has these powers of Ichya, Jnana, and Kriya, which is a cycle of moving into manifestation. So within the seed is the quality of expansion, of growth, of becoming. So Vedanta, and now this next part is, to me, is the difficult part. And this is in Christopher's book, he talks about it. So Vedanta says that nothing has ever happened. Now, when they talk like this, our scholars, they're talking about the pure, if you take them literally, if literal Vedanta, nothing has happened. There's no creation. It's all an illusion. The cycle of creation and dissolution is an illusion. Tantra says no. The one transforms to become the world. It's real. It becomes the subjects and the objects. Diversity is real, and so diversity should be celebrated. So then Christopher goes into this subtle, esoteric, what I think of as a very complex teaching about how the world really exists in our awareness, or that we can't know that it exists outside of our awareness, and so on. Something that personally I prefer not to get into. But this leads, this idea of the one as not being active, it leads to the difference of a path for renunciants, for monks and swamis, and the one for householders. So this is all what's discussed in Christopher's book. He says, this leads to the path of a philosophy that is transcendentalist, which could become a spiritual bypassing, versus Tantra's path of engagement with what is. So if the world is not real in some way, and it is a cause of suffering, then you want to pull away, pull back, and become a renunciant. Renunciation means renounce the world. Renounce the material. And Tantra then says, but Shakti became everything, so let's embrace that. Vedanta then can be austere, really hard. It's a great effort to become detached. Whereas Tantra has a wide range of practices such that everybody can find some practice that works for them. It could be Hatha Yoga, the physical practice. It could be a mental practice. It could be an energy practice. It could be, there's going to be a practice about the senses that we're going to look at later on in this course. Since around the year 1200, the differences between Vedanta and Tantra have been obscured. So I'm going to give sort of a history of how that happened, then we'll take a break. So around 1200, remember, Pratyabhinya Hridayam is around the year 1050. Around 1200, the Muslim invasion removed the Hindu rulers who sponsored the Tantric sages. Shay Mirage was known as Rajanaka Shay Mirage, the servant of the Maharaja. The Maharaja isn't there anymore, so they don't have that sponsorship. What happened, and this is what my meditation teacher Paul Muller says, is the Tantrikas asked the Vedantin monks in the matas to hold Tantra because the high Tantric sages aren't going to be there anymore. And over time, the Vedantins adopt Tantric practices, and it all gets mixed up. Practices like the very in-depth study of mantra, visualizations and chakras, everything about the subtle body, pranayamas. All this is out of Tantra, and it becomes adopted by the Vedantins. And then when yoga comes to the West, it's all mixed up, but without the name Tantra, because the Tantrikas that remain are very unconventional. They're controversial. So today, some scholars I've been noticing are calling the yoga that came to the West, they're calling it Neo-Vedanta, a combination of Vedanta, Patanjali's classical yoga, Tantric ideas and practices, Hatha yoga postures, usually dropping the word Tantra and any reference to Tantra. So it's all mixed up today, and since the 60s to the 70s, there's this rediscovery of the high Tantra from the year 800 to 1200 or so, and trying to reestablish what was the source. What was Tantra before it sort of got mixed in and in some sense simplified, made even easier, less subtle, less esoteric, more just do this, do that, do some hatha yoga, do some visualization without the high understanding behind it. And so after talking about this action, the 5 acts, what Supreme Consciousness does, what we do, after saying this is what makes us different from non-dual Vedanta, then Shay Mirage is going to come back in his commentary to talk about the 5 acts again. Okay, so this is me making it easy and simple. I have a feeling I didn't do that. But it's all about now one thing, the 5 acts, and we do it, and Supreme Consciousness does it. So then Shay Mirage is going to get into more detail. And Nicole talking about some ways that the acts manifest in everyday life. I think we're going to be coming back to some of that. So shall we take a break, Karen? Karen says thumbs up. So it's almost on the hour, so we'll come back about 4 or 5 minutes after the hour.
Yeah, that's great. And Jayendra, if you make me the host in the meantime, that'd be great.
Okay. So take a short break and we'll be back.
Hey, Kathy.
So, if you're back, hello. There we go. Well, Amy, I think your question about did Tantra develop into sex, I think that's more of a case of sort of a Western grabbing onto a philosophy at a very surface level. So it had been, you know, a lot of us that had been in yoga for a long time came up through a sort of mood of money's not good and I shouldn't love food so much, and sex, renunciation would be better because I'll maintain my essence and get brighter. And so there's a coming up through that confusion that Jayendra was talking about, the confusion of things and mixture of Tantra with Vedanta with the classical yoga thrown in. And then there's a misunderstanding or a shallow understanding of, oh, sex is God too. It's like, and then grabbing that and it becoming a sort of popularized commodity in a way. That's my quick answer to, did Tantra devolve into sex? I mean, Jayendra, do you have anything to add to that? It's just why the word Tantra got left out. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a few things. I was told once there were four words that began with M that were the not things not to do. One was meat. One was alcohol. And one was sex. It was like you weren't supposed to do it. So then the Tantrikas intentionally did that to show even this is consciousness.
Yeah.
That's one element. There's another one that one of our scholars has said, Carlos Pomeda has said, is there was a tantric sexual ritual. And the way that he described it, and probably nobody knows what it is today. The way that he described it was so involved over several days that it probably made the whole thing very boring. You know? It was like so deep, such a step-by-step thing. And it was one ritual amongst 100. And so then in modern times, somebody takes that and makes it the one and only. I have a friend who went to a retreat that was advertised as Tantra with asana. And she was so excited. When she got there, she found out she was supposed to have sex with everybody. She said, I think I'll go somewhere else.
Oops.
But I think in the highest sense, it's saying that everything is a form of Shakti. And everything can be a pathway to the experience of oneness, including the act of sexuality. And so that's how it is tantric, but then it gets sort of latched onto and perhaps attached to. Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, great, thank you. Marieke, I like your ears. Good job.
Thanks. I was feeling lots of light. I thought I should maybe just send some.
One time when I was older, well, I am older, but not too long ago when I was also older, I had a hairdresser person who said, you know, you need to get your hair up so people's eyes will look up, you know, so they don't look down at things that are dropping down. And I thought, yeah, I should just wear things like Marieke's wearing. Like people's eyes would always go up. Okay, so let's settle in for a second half by having me read aloud the sutras through in English from 1 to 10. And you can just close your eyes or settle back or relax. I'm going to use Joan Ravinsky's translation. By the way, if you have this book of hers, you might, and you haven't done so already, you might want to turn to the back where her longtime student gives her a kind of a eulogy. She wrote this while she was dying. Pretty amazing to read what her student says about her at the back of the book. Anyway, settle in and listen. Read aloud time, story time. Jaw-dropping wonder in unfettered freedom. The cause of the universe is this. In the beginning, the luminous womb is, and the luminous womb willingly leaps in delight and lets herself go of herself upon herself. It all comes forth. She births herself as the many who interchangeably play the roles of objects and subjects, reciprocally adapting. Each of the many, even in their individual forms, embodying the one who condenses into mind and its objects. She confines herself by the limits of space, time, perfection, knowledge, and action. Though she is one, she is also two. She is three. She is four. She is even 35. She is earth. She is water. She is fire, air, and space. She is also all the contradictory ways of seeing herself. Contracting her powers, she explores limitation, becoming ordinary, isolated individuals. Even like that, her 5 acts are performed. Okay, so back in we go. And Jayendra and I, a couple of days ago, he emailed me, said, well, actually I've gotten some feedback from a couple of you here and saying it seems a little fast. It's like, yeah, we're trying to get through all 20 sutras in 13 weeks, but Jayendra just said, yeah, we were going to do Sutra 10 and 11 today, both of which I love, I like all the sutras actually, but today we are slowing it down and we may not even be finished with 10 today. We'll see. Just take it easy and settle in. We'll get as far as we get. So, oops. Screen share coming. All right, and so we're kind of working through the commentaries. Jayendra did the first 2 commentaries. These are Mirage's commentaries on his own sutra. And so I want to do his 3rd commentary on his own sutra. And he says, the goddess of awareness he doesn't say it this way, but the goddess of awareness manifests worlds and universes and galaxies, mosquitoes, fireflies, and worms, the entire spectrum. And each of her manifestations is appropriate to its level. So this reminded me of Darwin's quote, one of his quotes. He says, there's a grandeur in this view of life with its several powers, having been originally breathed into a few forms or into one. And that, whilst this planet has gone cycling on according to the fixed law of gravity, from so simple a beginning, endless forms most beautiful and most wonderful have been and are being evolved. Thank you, Darwin. It's just a beautiful expression of this philosophy that we're teaching, and I love it that it's quite scientific as well. Science mirroring the truth of the spiritual teachings and vice versa. So she, awareness, enters into each level and dances with it. She enfolds herself into it. She involutes or involves herself in it. In a sense, she becomes it. And just the same way, what you experience is you involving yourself in it, becoming it, involuting your awareness into it. In other words, what you experience is flowing forth from you. Awareness in you as you enters the world and its objects, and you and your awareness dance with life, enfold into it. You involve yourself in life. And in this way, you are a portal through which awareness spills forth into manifestation. That which you experience is flowing forth from you this very second, not later, not just once in a while, this very second. This is a super important point, and it's a significant difference from the idea that the world calls us out. And this idea that the world calls us out is very common in psychology and spirituality and in ecological psychology. This idea is something like, billboards and sensations and circumstances and people and trees and birds and bugs call our attention out, and it calls it out from a still point at the center of us. But non-dual Tantra and also Taoism and other traditions as well say that attention awareness flows out from us to create the world of 10,000 things. It's a big difference. It's a primary big difference. I don't think I'll go to that. I just have a teacher who teaches self-observation so well, but even in his teaching, I see that he's saying the world calls us out, and we want to be called out, but it's flipping it, saying no, awareness is flowing out to create my perception of the world. Awareness of her own free will flows out. And yeah, we're taken. I'm so taken with that. We're taken with the world, but it's an inside out job. It's not awareness being called out, but awareness flowing out. And so if there's a weakness or something to be done, I don't even want to say weakness, it's simply our lack of ability or unawareness, a not knowing of skillful means to pivot our awareness back into the still point from which it all arises. So Shakti gets lost in the world, so to speak. And there's, the fairy tales and Hindu mythology, there's so many great stories that speak to this. How about the princess in the basement of the castle, sound asleep, or wherever she is, it's lost in the world. And there's so many stories like that. We become mala-covered samsaran. But even in that lostness, it is still the goddess concealing herself in the world as it is. And grace continues to happen again and again, and presents us with ways and means, like the practice of meditation, a primary means, to pivot awareness back inward. And once that grace of skillful means has presented itself to us, whether maybe that happened at your very first asana class. This happens so often with people, their very first asana class, they go, oh my gosh, I love this. And, you can even think, really? Why? It's like we just took some shapes, and breathed, but what they've experienced is one skillful means by which their awareness was turned back in. And when awareness moves inward, it's lovely. It's a surprising and delightful loveliness. We want more of that. Mind always wants more. We'll always move towards that which is more lovely, or always want more of that which is more lovely. And that might be something one experiences, for example, in an asana class, or out in nature, or with a child, or various ways. But the point is awareness toggling or pivoting back inward. So I want to have an experience of this now, and it's super simple. All you have to do is sit still and take your awareness outward to some object in your environment and really involve yourself in that object. For example, I'm looking at a book and I'm looking at the title of it, and now I'm really thinking, whoa, I have that book, but I never really read it, and I'm really getting involved in that object. So take a minute or so to do that. As you continue, can you feel your awareness and even your prana or your life force kind of interdigitating with the object, like really moving into it, in a way becoming it, creating it with your awareness? And now traverse back the other way. Gradually kind of pull your awareness out of your chosen object. Draw it back. You know how to do this. Draw it back. If you need to close your eyes, do that. Until you've remembered your center. And the object itself has dissolved. You've sort of dissolved it. Your awareness went somewhere else. You've uncreated it in a way. We do that hundreds of times a day. Okay, so open your eyes. Well, this isn't the only time we're going to do this, so we'll see what we have time for today, but we won't speed along. Take our time here. So, actually, you know, I could stop, since I just promised to not speed along. Let me stop the share for a minute and see if you have any comments or questions, input. Yeah, Megan?
I just had a realization of the language that I'm using when I teach and talk about awareness. And I often say develop, right? And so I was like, does that imply that it doesn't exist, right? Because like that, I mean, because I don't want that, that's not what I'm teaching, right? I'm talking about expanding what's already there. So anyway, I was like,
no, you're right on to something. And I've noticed that in my teaching too. It's like, you're gonna, you know, create a bigger light. And it's like, oh, wait a second, hold on. a greater remembrance, yeah, which will make you brighter. So it's fine. I mean, I think we navigate the world of words, but it is like to continue to kind of herd ourselves back away from that pretty deeply ingrained belief that something's wrong or not enough, or it needs to be worked hard to be built up, and say, wait a second, first principle, it already is. And yeah, Megan, I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, we'll go on. So Shay Mirage's next commentary is some of the thoughts from there is that this concealment or forgetting of wholeness can also mean corrosion. seeing the objects of your experience as separate from yourself can have a corrosive effect. It can, I don't think it necessarily always does, but it can degrade the integrity and intrinsic wholeness and equality of your awareness. And this corrosion of wholeness is countered by the act of revelation, anugraha, grace, by which awareness manifests the object, whether it is a person or a flower or anything whatsoever, as one with itself. So that's big. And I want to make some examples here that maybe you can relate to and we can play with. One example from my childhood, and I just don't know if it's common or not. I know some people have had it, but I don't know how common it is. And that is language and concept. This isn't quite the example yet, but language and concept are what create distinction and diversity, which that can then corrode into isolation and separation. So by the same token, language can, like mantra, can be the way back to an experience of wholeness. So you maybe have experienced this with mantra japa or with kirtan. It's interesting that so many spiritual traditions, or maybe all of them, sing. I don't think all of them do sing, but there's so much singing in the use of voice and singing as a way to remember what you might call God. But this is the example I meant to start with that was perhaps you've had an experience. Were you ever as a child, did you ever like say a word over and 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 over again, and it started to dissolve, and there was something big and mysterious that opened? Again, it might be an obscure example. Anybody else had that experience ever? No? It's too obscure?
Yes, Karen, I actually still do that to this day. I find it's so amusing to me to just repeat a word over and over. Something as arbitrary as the word let's. Like, what is let's? It's let us, but what is it?
I was going to say the same thing, Karen. I think that's an excellent example. I still do that, and the word almost becomes this non-thing, and you start to wonder, what is this word, and where did it come from, and why does it change when you say it over and over and over and over? So I think that's an excellent example. I still do that.
You're making a great argument for the childlike mind that Shay Mirage says. This is good. So yeah, so maybe obviously not just as a child. Good. I'm glad that related a little bit to some of you anyway.
William Kotzwinkle writes about that in his novel, The Fan Man.
Who is that?
William Kotzwinkle. He's just, I think, he wrote the book based on the screenplay he wrote the book based on the movie for E.T.
Oh, wonderful. You should put that in the chat. Okay. So awareness is the bestower of grace when it's manifesting the object. Actually, I'm going to skip that part because I want to move on now. But this next one, in summary, each cognitive act simultaneously, each act of awareness or perception simultaneously expresses 4 of the 5 acts of the goddess. So creation, maintenance, dissolution, and either you're remembering or you're forgetting. But you're doing it all day long. I'm looking at a book, I'm manifesting it, I'm maintaining it, I'm dissolving it by turning my awareness away. And in that ongoing constant cycle, I'm either remembering that I'm part of the whole, or I'm totally a mala covered samsara, or somewhere in between on that spectrum. So I want to do a couple of exercises now. One is just easier maybe in that this is just in your imagination. Do you know that when people get eye surgery, cataract surgery, they say that they suddenly see the world so vividly that they have an experience of ecstasy. And so can you imagine now, just close your eyes and imagine. I'll talk you through this. Imagine that you just got new glasses or you got your eyes fixed. And suddenly you're seeing the world so vividly. Every color is just shimmering, bright, amazing. you haven't seen the world this way since maybe ever. Imagine feeling sort of ecstatic with this bright, expanded view of the world. And now imagine that you begin to contract your focus, narrower, 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 and narrower, till you start to see what's wrong and how you need to fix this or that. Like maybe you need to water that plant, or prune it, or fill the bird feeder. Narrow, so you're down into the cracks of things. You've really narrowed your vision, and probably the ecstatic ecstasy of remembrance has dissolved. And let's try another one. I know visualization is not everybody's deal, but hopefully more or less useful here. This next one is also an inner visualization. Again, this one actually goes the other way. So the previous visualization, you had an expanded vision with brightening of colors and vividness of details, and then you contracted it down and in and down and in into a kind of smallness. This one, I want you to go the other way. If you can call to mind, I'm going to start with a more contracted view. If you can call to mind someone that you're having a problem with. It could maybe even be someone that you don't know personally. It could be a political figure, but I wouldn't make it too difficult. Don't make it too hard. Don't make it too contracted. Call to mind this person. The personalities. You both have a personality, an individual, Anu personality, A-N-U personality. And can you feel in this difficulty the corrosive effect of the difference? Now visualize going the other way. So pull your awareness as best you can. Remember, it can be very sticky. If you chose somebody too hard, it might be too sticky. But as best you can, pull your awareness up and out of that separateness, stickiness. And you could even visualize both of you standing side by side, really high above it all. Outer atmosphere of the world, if you like. Personalities left far behind. And together you're looking down at your shared drama. And perhaps in that higher, larger view, a kind of dissolving of the corrosive effect of the difference. You are the creator, sustainer, and dissolver. And you're either remembering or forgetting. You're either having some agency or way to remember or can't remember how to remember. Okay, so you can come back from that. I'll stop the screen share, and if anybody wants to chime in.
Karen, I was just thinking that contemplation on standing side by side with the person that you're having an issue with and sort of floating high above your drama, and how helpful that was just then for me. And I was thinking afterwards, how would I manage to do that in the moment of conflict without saying, could you wait a minute, I need to close this. I need to close my eyes and imagine you and I side by side, floating above all this, because right now I'd like to wring your neck. But I love that. That was very good. I'm going to use that one.
We could just all become very strange yogins. Excuse me. Anybody?
We could do worse.
True. Marieke, I saw
As
you.
the person wearing the unicorn horn.
Yes, true. Excuse me. I need to put on my unicorn hat. Okay, anybody else?
That was powerful, because when I think about that person, I usually only am able to see the things, the stickiness about that person. But when I went above, I was able to see my participation in the stickiness of below, right? So it was like removing both. Yeah, that was really, that was pretty cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like to remember to do that more often with a couple of sticky people in my life. And it's interesting when I do remember to do it. Sometimes if I've let it get too sticky with that person, I can't get up there. So then that's something to observe as well. And that came up in our text. It's come up more than once. It's like, okay, so now let go of the story as best you can, and to bring your awareness into the stickiness itself. You know, that's samskara land there. And so I find it useful, even if I can't get up and out of the stickiness, it's still such a useful exercise when I remember it. Okay. So, take off your gravity boots and put on your unicorn hat. Great. Nice, Marieke. Now share again. Screen share again. Shay Mirage's commentary, part 5. So here in this part, he points to the Spandakarika, which is stanzas on vibration, and quote from there: "We praise the benevolent source of the activity of the wheel of powers of consciousness, the expansion, unmesha, opening of the eyes, of which is the arising of the universe, and the contraction, nimesha, closing of the eyes, of which it is its dissolution." So in this one, he's really pointing to the simultaneity of contraction and expansion. And I think the simple example of this is balanced action in asana. Jayendra taught a great class with arm balances, but if you could just think of pulling into an asana with muscular energy, you could just do it right now, even engage muscle energy and kind of round yourself up and make a little nugget of yourself. And then is it not true that in that very moment, there's an impulse towards expansion as well? So, or if you, expand, is there not in that very expansion impulse to pull it in and create a boundary to that expansion? So that's the beauty of the principle of balanced action in asana, and hopefully highlights the teaching of the Spandakarika, or kind of brings it alive in a way that's very familiar to you. It's also in your whole life, because, you know, you wake up, you inhale, you open your eyes, you create the world, you expand into your day and what you're going to do today. And in this way, you dissolve the unitive world from which you just came. You go to sleep at night, you exhale, you close your eyes, and you dissolve the world of 10,000 things that you were just involved in all day long. So it's just this constant Spandakarika. There's a great poem by David White that speaks this really well, so I'll read that now. In that first hardly noticed moment in which you wake, coming back to this life from the other, more secret, movable, and frighteningly, amazingly honest world where everything began, there is a small opening into the new day, which closes the moment you begin your plans. What you can plan is too small for you to live. What you can live wholeheartedly will make plans enough for the vitality hidden in your sleep. To be human is to become visible while carrying what is hidden as a gift to others. To remember the other world in this world is to live in your true inheritance. That's like Tantra. There we go. Beautiful. Thank you, David White. You are not a troubled guest on this earth. You are not an accident amidst other accidents. You were invited from another and greater night than the one from which you have just emerged. So I'm going to stop there. The poem goes on and it's beautiful, but it will be in your notes for you to go back. But this, in that first hardly noticed moment in which you wake, just before you open your eyes, or just as you're opening your eyes, there's this opportunity, or there's a pivoting outward of the great awareness out into your day. And gradually but inevitably, we shift the contents of our chitta, let's say, so that as gradually but inevitably as we open our eyes, we are starting to create a new world. And of course, gradually but inevitably, it can go the other way too. And we're all going to be creating a world, and it can be suffering or joy, usually a mixture. So to sum up this section, every creation is simultaneously a dissolution and vice versa. Every kind of expansion can also be seen as a contraction of the opposite thing, and vice versa. Wake up, we're contracting and dissolving the night that we just came from, and you go to sleep and you're dissolving the day that you just came from, just as a practical example. But it happens in every breath, happens in every pulse of your cells and your organs. That's the doctrine of Spanda. And stop share again. I should have a really intelligent question to ask you, but I don't. Let's say, what do you think? Any thoughts on that section? Ramble on then. Oh yeah, Nicole, I thought I saw you reaching for your microphone. There we go.
I was wondering what to do about mosquitoes. I don't want them in my awareness. Sorry about that.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's go on then. All right, so here we go. Shay Mirage's commentary, he tells us we have to have a firm determination and devotion, or Wallace calls it a beneficial obsession, so that we can practice in relationship to any experience, including mosquitoes, and that we can affirm the authorship of our own inner experience. This section, I think, you know, Amy, you said, remember to remember. It's like this section speaks to that. How do we remember to remember? And this feeling, so that we begin to be able to say this feeling, whatever it is, arose from me as a spontaneous expression of what I am, and will dissolve back into that same ground of being. You know, there's a saying out there in the world, in the States anyway, it goes, I'll write it down. You spot it, you got it. So a quickie, you know, it's out there, it's in you. You spot it, you got it. All emotions and thoughts arise out of what I am. So I am absolutely equal to each experience. That's really hopeful. If this feels true to you, if this resonates and you say it's, and if you're beginning to experience it or continuing to experience it as a truth, it's like, yeah, it's came out of me. then you have to, it just ipso facto, you are equal to that experience. How could you not be, since it came from you? It's a very hopeful teaching. I like what Wallace says is, what Shiva gets what Shiva wants, always, and you are that. And this is it. But I loved my spell check said Sheila gets what Sheila wants, and you are Sheila. So if you want to be Sheila, you can, because you can do what you want. So there is a practice that I would wanted to point to now. And this, we're not going to do this practice right now, but it could be something you want to take on. This is the remembering to remember idea. Brain research is abundant and wonderful and exciting and showing all sorts of different things, including how you can employ your brain chemistry to help you establish a habit or a beneficial obsession. So, and this is using the fact that small rewards create dopamine. It's, you know, it's why people get so addicted to certain apps on their device, because they get reward, 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 reward. So I'm not recommending that, but to use the actuality of small rewards create dopamine to help you remember to remember. So if you are interested, you could do something like set out a small pile of stones or 9 pennies or shekels or whatever. And each time you do the practice, which I'm going to point back to in a moment, you put one of those in a container on your puja or somewhere, 9 pennies in one pocket, transfer to the other. So you kind of play a game and make your own brain a willing playmate in this game. And maybe set out it for yourself, what would be realistic for you, that say 9 times or 3 times, or how many times a day might you want to make this game of remembering to remember, so that you say, this feeling, whatever it is, arose from me as a spontaneous expression of what I am and will dissolve back into that same grounded being. I would recommend you make this your own language so that it's really right. And maybe this is just right for you, but we have to have firm determination and devotion. We can't just remember it, you know, maybe once a week or once a month. I mean, this is right. It's like we got to pull up the steady practice over a long period of time with devotion. You know, that idea is like, this has to be continuous, and not, you know, not to instantiate a feeling of remember, this is the easy path. This is the path of where your mind wants to go to that which is more lovely. But if we don't remember to remember, the mind's not going to get a chance to go to that which is more lovely. So we won't be able to start to groove or toggle our awareness back in. Obviously, meditation is super important for grooving or strengthening that pivot point of awareness back in. But this practice is really more remembering to remember throughout your day. Give it a try like that. This feeling, whatever it is, arose from me as a spontaneous expression of what I am and will dissolve back into that same ground of being. All emotions and thoughts arise out of what I am, so I'm absolutely equal to each experience. You take that on as a practice, on through the day sort of practice. Using dopamine as your ally. Okay. I really didn't think that we'd get all the way to number 7, but we will, apparently. So we have time. Anybody want to speak in? I don't think we're going to do breakout rooms. We aren't doing breakout rooms today, but we're a smaller group. So I'd love to hear maybe from somebody that hasn't spoken yet. Brave, be brave. What do you think, Alita? Ha, gotcha.
Called me out, didn't you? There's so much that the remembering to remember is, it's just, I feel like a baby in all of this. This has really been really good to go through this with everybody, and practicing this every day, and it's a lot. I still feel like a baby, so I'm making baby steps.
That's great. Thank you. Stephanie, I haven't met you. I haven't met your voice yet.
That's because I feel like making baby steps too. But I might say, in a way, it's a nice challenge to be practicing to remember, because it's very easy to remember when things are going in a flow, and then when things get a little bit nasty or ugly, it's so easy to step back in old patterns without awareness. Mm-hmm. So that's why I've been exploring the past few weeks with a back injury.
Oh, yeah.
So that's really challenging. The moments that my back is really going well, I feel that the practice is really easy. But the moments my back is really painful, it's a challenge to remember.
I definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
Megan, oh, she relates too, yeah. Okay. A couple of others of you whose voice hasn't are probably relieved because I'm going to go on. But you know who you are. I'll catch you later. Share screen. Okay, this is the last bit, Shay Mirage's commentary, 7th one. He says, for this very reason, those who constantly cultivate and practice this come to know that all things are the expansion of their own nature. They're called liberated in life by our tradition. My guru calls it enlightened duality. So we're living in duality, but there's an enlightenment within duality. I love some of these phrases from Christopher Wallace. You know everything you need to know, which turns out to be not much on the level of concept anyway. And you know everything you need to know when you need to know it and not a moment before. In this sense, you are omniscient. You can do whatever needs, I hope that lands, or you can remember times when it really did. You just knew what you needed to know when it was time to know it, or other times, there's so many teachers on this call, you feel, oh, I don't know, I'm going to have to really prepare. I'm going to have to make this a brilliant sequence and an amazing theme that I'm going to teach, and it's going to be really great. And then you get to class and it doesn't really work. It was the most brilliant teaching prep you ever did, and it just goes flat. And other times you go and teach and it's like, maybe you weren't feeling even prepared, and you just it just flows because you knew everything. You were tapped in that way. You were omniscient, if you will. You knew what you needed to know, and not a moment before. I'm not recommending that you don't prepare, but you know the difference. You can do whatever needs to be done and feel no need to do anything you cannot do. How about that one? You can do whatever needs to be done and feel no need to do anything that you cannot do. I want to write that on the inside of my frontal lobe. And in this sense, you're omnipotent. You feel as humble as the tiniest creature and as vast as the sky. And in this sense, you are Shiva. Wisdom, or Sri Nisargadatta, who actually was mentioned in Christopher Wallace's book. He he became enlightened into teachings that are very much like non-dual Tantra, even though he didn't have any access to any of those treatments or any of those teachings. And he says, wisdom tells me I'm nothing, love tells me I am everything, and between the two, my life flows. So Christopher Wallace has a, he ends this section with, I thought, a very good contemplation. This is why I thought maybe we'd have time to do it as a breakout, but I think it's probably best not, because it is a big contemplation. In addition to, or kind of in partnership with, the possibility of remembering to remember and doing that more than once a day, that exercise, I should say, that practice, that you could journal or contemplate. I'll just read what he says. You can gain insight into the difference between who you are and who you think you are by comparing what is with what you think you want. In other words, as unbelievable as it might seem to you now, what you really are always loves and wants what is in any given circumstance, including the ever-changing nature of what is. The tension generated by the belief that you want things to be different is the suffering that points out to you the presence of untruth. That was a mistype. If you really want to know what kind of person you are, look at the whole world of your experience, everything that you see and think and feel and know, because you, what you really are, creates and sustains it. I think this is a huge practice. I mean, Stephanie just spoke to it. What about when my back hurts? And wow. So the difference between who I am and what I think I want, it's a big contemplation. And if you are able or willing to take that on, I'll go out in the notes, or you have Wallace's book. You can check it out there at the end of chapter 10. It could be a bhavana contemplation. We've both, Jayendra and I have both mentioned bhavana more than once, where you come into don't just sit down and drill into it from surface mind, sit down meditatively, drop down and in, and drop that question or that contemplation down and in, and see if you can journal. I know we promised no homework, so this isn't homework. This is just a possibility for your week ahead. Notice I gave you actually 2 homeworks, but I'm calling them something else. Maybe you want to practice remembering to remember, and maybe you have a chance to do some bhavana on this contemplation. And Jayendra, do you have anything you want to add in? Because we're about at finish time. And
no, that's great.
Okay. Well, Jay and I will cook up something for next week. And oh yeah, I think I teach on Saturday on this, so I'll probably focus it around Sutra 11. Haven't planned anything yet, but I will plan a class. And anything else? Any input or thoughts to end with? Yeah, Megan.
Talking a lot today, but I put it in the chat, and maybe this is a follow-up in Slack, but a question about, I'm familiar with a few of the scholars, like we were talking about the history of scholars and stuff, and I was just wondering, I know that I know of some Western teachers that are doing that original text, but I was just wondering if you knew of any Indian scholars that were doing similar work.
I think Jayendra might. I don't.
Not really, no. What I've been told is there's a lot in Western universities now, a lot of study of these sorts of things, these texts. But I don't know of anything. In India, the one thing I know of is there's an organization that makes the Sanskrit form of the text available universally for free. So this squiggly line form, Devanagari. There's an Indian organization that does that. And they've made it their mission to sort of a photograph, scan, get it on the web, get it out there for everybody. That's the only thing that comes to mind.
Okay. Kathy?
Oh, I just wanted to say the two scholars I know who are working on Sanskrit and Southeast Asian tantric texts are Alexis Sanderson at Oxford University and Andrea Acri in Paris.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Not in India.
Not in India.
Sorry.
There is a teaching, I don't remember who said it, some great guru, wise person said that the spiritual heart it has moved or expanded from India into the West. And that was said some decades ago, and I think maybe we're seeing the effect of that or the possibility of that being true.
Or maybe just more money available to support scholarship?
Maybe so. Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you. See you next time.